going to discuss incentives. Incentives are those things that influence our decisions and make us either act or not to act in a certain way. Incentives can be either positive or negative. For example, I can give students extra credit for coming to every class, or I can take some credit away if students miss some classes. I'm pretty sure you've seen examples of incentives in your everyday lives many times. Your parents a lot of times provided you with incentives, or you as a parent will provide your kids with incentives. You can either reward a good behavior, providing incentives to create more, or you can punish bad behavior, providing incentives to act less that way. When it comes to incentives and policies, let's look why incentives matter when it comes to policies. Why we discuss those things together. Why do we create policy? It's usually when we're not happy with the current situation, with existing situation. So policies are aimed to improve existing conditions. So we want to force people somehow to change their behavior. We have to remember that any activity, anytime a person acts, that activity will have some costs and benefits. When deciding about participating in an activity, we will always weigh costs and benefits. When are we going to participate in that activity? Obviously, when benefits exceed costs. When are we going to stay away from that activity? When the opposite is true, when benefits are lower than the cost. So individuals, firms, and government can change costs and benefits associated with activities in order to get you to change your behavior. So when we design in policies, all we're doing is changing the benefits and the cost of a certain activity, and as a result, we can see changed behavior. Let's talk about perverse incentives. When policy change results in creating incentives that were not intended, it's called perverse incentives. So somehow we didn't think about certain incentives, right? As a result, we created perverse incentives. Perverse incentives go hand in hand with unintended consequences. When we didn't account for perverse incentives, we may create unintended consequences of a policy. Those are the unintended and undesirable results which are contrary to behavior that incentives was trying to promote. For example, in your book, you were provided with two different examples of Mexico City and car seats for infants that describe a situation in which perverse incentives were created, and as a result, the policy resulted in unintended consequences. In Mexico City, the pollution level was really high. The city government was trying to reduce the pollution, and what they did, they decided to forbid certain cars driving on certain days. For example, if you have a plate that ends with an odd number, you're allowed to drive Monday, Wednesday. If you have a car plate that ends with the even number, you're allowed to drive on Tuesday, Thursday only. So what people did, those people who still needed to drive to work every day, instead of starting carpooling, they actually tried to buy a second car so they're going to be able to drive every single day. So what happened? That second car was not a new car, a brand new car. That car was much older because people didn't have enough money to buy a decent car. And older cars have worse pollution systems. As a result, Mexico City saw even more pollution than they did before. So this is an unintended consequences. We created an undesirable result, which was a contrary to that behavior that we were trying to promote. Car seats for infants, another policy that was trying to reduce number of accidents, resulted in children sitting on their parents' lap when flying different airlines. So the policy was trying to make each infant to have their own seat. Of course, that means that parents had to buy tickets for their infants. That increased the price of traveling for many families, so many families would opt in for driving instead of flying. And as we know, driving has much higher probability of accidents than flying. So as a result, we saw more accidents involving infants than we did before the policy. Once again, we did not think about perverse incentives, and we created unintended consequences contrary to behavior that we were trying to promote.